everyone, and welcome to the Next Decision podcast. My name is Jarie Bolander. I'm your host today. And joining me is Brett House, founder and CEO of HighSignals, a agentic AI-driven technology and strategy company. So, Brett, how's it going?
How are you? Glad to be part of the show. I do a little podcasting on my own. And,
I've heard.
This is fun to be a part of, so
Yeah.
I appreciate being here.
Yeah, no, we really appreciate that. You know what's really funny? I was just like trying to count out how many places we've worked together, and it was like New Star, TransUnion, Media Radar, and now here,
HighSignals.
right? HighSignals, yeah.
You've kind of been with me through a couple of exits,
Yes.
through this sort of MarTech, ad tech, data tech, AI journey that I've been on, and now I finally decided to go independent and launch my own business and start to build from the ground up. And it's a big, hairy, audacious plan, and it sometimes feels like I'm chewing on glass and looking down an empty elevator shaft. In terms of, or a shark-infested waters, that sort of analogy, like walking out on the plank with pirates behind me, sharks below me, blood in the water. So there's been somebody already sacrificed. Sometimes I feel like that on a day-to-day basis when you're in the startup world, because it is a little bit of a fear of death.
100%. Yeah. Welcome to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, exactly.
There
keeps you on your toes.
Yeah. There's typically a 2-drink minimum, but sometimes a 10-drink minimum, depending on what day of the week. So, yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about HighSignals? Because I think you just started it like December 2025. Like, it's pretty new.
Yeah. So I was at a company called Media Radar running their marketing, their product go-to-market in product strategy functions all the way through sort of the customer life cycle. So we supported the customer success teams, the sales teams, the marketing teams, the product organization. And having a long career in sort of data tech companies that are looking to rapidly grow, not necessarily unrealistically, often I found that go-to-market was just fundamentally broken. And a lot of people define it in different ways, right? So I realized being there, seeing a lot of sort of the trappings that I saw at other organizations when you're trying to bring product and or brand into a kind of a commercial reality, and deliver some sort of value and differentiation to market. Oftentimes that it's that classic sort of Chinese whispering approach, right? Where, someone at the beginning of the circle says something into the person next to them's ear. And then by the time it goes around the circle, it's completely changed. And so I've seen that in multiple organizations where I've worked. It's kept me sort of gainfully employed, and I've been part of a lot of really great growth trajectories and exits. But I realized that with this era that we're entering into, which is very agentically AI, not to sound trite, driven, and you're starting to see what I call a GTM compression, where your decisions are expected to be made more quickly and at a higher fidelity. So how do you make good decisions without just relying on your gut, right? And there's machine learning and deep learning and agentic solutions that actually help do that at a 10, 20, 30, 50x speed and quality when the right guardrails in place. And so I thought, here's a huge opportunity to really help thousands of companies out there. I've worked for many of them in the ad tech, data tech, martech space that are trying to bolt on AI and other, let's say outdated SaaS solutions onto relatively broken go-to-market operating models, right?
That's totally
people
that's
systems.
100%. Yeah. 100%. Right?
And if you're trying to bolt something onto kind of a broken strategy, a broken organization, with no sort of underlying orchestration and strategic guidance, you're just going to speed up wrong, right?
It's going to just go bad really faster.
Yeah. You're going to compound the bad versus compounding the good. And so, with PE pressure and PE squeezing these orgs, and there's a tidal wave of AI companies and tech companies, composable tech, et cetera, I thought this is the opportunity for me. I could stick around in this organization for 3-4 more years, or I could go out and actually become part of the solution. And sort of, it was also part of it was to become sort of agentically super powered myself in a
Yep.
way.
Yep. Yep.
So so I'm currently partnering with part of it was a build versus buy. So we're building some of the tech, partnering for some other tech. And the idea is basically to connect from brand and product launch life cycles all the way through the marketing, sales, and client engagement or customer success motions. And I have operating systems which are powered by agents behind each one of those sort of core functions. If you think of a product marketing, sales, in your sort of typical demand functions, and then your growth functions, which are your client management functions. I built an operating system with a business intelligence layer underneath it that allows you to produce and decide much more quickly than lean teams are able to do in house, and then also provide an analytics underpinning that's sort of independent of tech stack. Tech stacks are often very noisy and
Yeah, they just
messy.
move around. Yeah, they're super noisy and messy. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good point.
And
Yeah.
and so yeah, if you don't have data to make decisions on it, everybody talks about data-driven decisioning, but when you have a tech stack that's got 13 new moving parts and 2 instances of Salesforce and a marketing automation platform, and you've done some recent M&A, and you throw in some other stuff, and half the org is using SalesLoft. We've got two in my last organization. We had 2 or 3 customer analytics or product analytics solutions, Mixpanel plus Pendo plus. And when you have all that information, it's very tough to get the information and insights you need, whether you're going into a QBR,
Yeah.
right? Or you're just trying to understand churn trends and how they break down by persona, by category, by client and account type. How do you get instant access to that information without having to do 2 years of sort of
Oh,
data
even
integration and
worse. Yeah.
hygiene? And
Yeah.
so that's one of the
It's
big
a
problems that
mess.
I realize. I call it my control tower OS,
Hmm.
which and we partnered for this, but it's basically a conversational AI solution that seamlessly plugs into your entire stack, and then pulls out insights and synthesizes what can be messy duplicative data. And I realize that's critical as you bring products or brands to market, as you enable your commercial organization to kind of row in the same direction. You need to have some outcomes based sort of insight and view into what's going on. And you also need to have kind of unified KPIs and metrics across those functions, because oftentimes they operate in silos. Um,
Totally. And yeah, it's like closing the loop, right? I think that's the power that we see, or at least I see in these agentic solutions. One, okay, everything gets hooked together because it's a gigantic rat's nest mess for sure. And then two, the most important thing is closing the loop. You have this happened, then this happens, then now what do I do? So we tend to talk about what's my next best move, which I think is a great way to think about it, because as you know, if you've all these disparate systems like trying to figure out what's real, it's like, and you can't figure that out, then you don't know what your next best move is. So yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah,
And
and I think a big part of this is sort of, and I'm going to steal some words of the great Lou Pascalis, which he has used in a couple of our podcast episodes at Signal and Noise. I'll tell you a little bit about that later.
cool.
But like about engineering relevance
Hmm.
into every interaction, and a lot of that process when commercial organizations are taking a product or a set of products to market, a lot of that process is done intuitively. It's done manually by
Hmm.
individuals who are operating under their own spiffs and incentive structures, right? Either by team or as individuals. And for relevance to one person means is something very different to somebody else, right? You do
Right.
hire salespeople that know a specific category, know how to
Right.
speak to a specific buyer type, like a CMO or a data analytics professional. But how do you actually operationalize consistency across that, so that when your BDRs and your SDRs, your salespeople, your customer success people, they're begging for this information, and to require all of them to manually generate
Yeah.
10 different ways to communicate with 10 different buyer types
Yeah.
is just doesn't scale, right? And it's going to be so inconsistent and incongruent
Oh
across
yeah,
people.
it's gonna blow your brand away. I mean,
Yeah.
like,
And
no
and
consistency
there's
at all.
ways that the compounding effects of properly trained agents can do a lot of that for you. And so our operating system sort of centralizes that sort of intel, that IP, and it
Mhm.
collects everything from your CRM information, your all of your product collateral and product documentation, all of your competitive intel. It can go across the web to see market trends and pull in, sort of exogenous factors that are impacting your market. And it ingests that and continuously ingests that as that stuff updates and changes to ensure that you're doing things like ABM in an actual effective way, and that you're able to produce and generate this stuff in an automated way so that the salespeople aren't writing 17 versions of emails
Yeah.
manually. And once they find that something works, there's no compounding.
Right.
There's compounding in the sense that they'll use that over and over again. But how do you go once that runs out of steam? A
Then what?
message to market, a message to a buyer, something that's really triggering or driving engagement with somebody that you're talking to. How does that adapt and change? Because people tend to get stuck in what works, but they're unable to sort of play five-dimensional chess and see, well, there's a shift happening, or there's a competitive that's entered in the market, right? Or our value proposition, because of product changes to the roadmap,
Yep.
is evolving, and so our product market fit is evolving. How do you automate the application of those types of messages to market, whether it's a sales message, a marketing message, a brand message, at scale and consistently across teams of 20, 50, 100 people? Very, very hard to do. And I've rarely in my career seen that done with teams of humans. Oftentimes people look at the marketing team to do all of this
Right.
very effectively, especially when you start to hyper segment and get to some level of ABM. There's been a lot of ABM promise in the past, and I'm just not
Right.
sure it's ever really lived up to its the hype.
I don't. Yeah. I can't. I can't think of any really good examples, at least in my own experience, where it has.
Yeah.
People, I mean, they want to do it. Of course, it's important. It's one of those things where if you could, you would want a segment of one, right? Like, I'm going one to one with you, Brett, and we're talking about exactly what you need. That can't happen, but I think it can start to happen now, especially with all of these agentic solutions. And I do think, to your point about the I think the biggest bang for the buck in all this AI stuff is going to be all of the signals coming in and then filtering out all the noise, like, and then really amplifying what matters, because a lot of it's just gut, like, we did this campaign, and Bob is not talking to Jan, and like, like it's just like, oh, why did you waste 10, 20, 50, maybe 100 grand on that when it doesn't work anymore? Because we know it doesn't work. So how but I think what's interesting is, like, you're building this operating system and pulling it all together. How has it been to try to convince people that this is the way to go? Is it hard, or are you just like, look, this is what the results are. The results are the results. Like, you
Yeah,
can't argue with that.
and I think with go to market, just as a generic term, you tend to it does live at the cross section of multiple functions, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Product to marketing to sales to customer success, and then hopefully there's feedback loops that are built in, and aligned incentives, aligned goals. So oftentimes the challenge that I've faced is, and that I've seen in talking to multiple people in the market, is who owns that budget. Now, a more mature
Mhm.
organization might have an independent go to market sort of coordination, orchestration layer. There might be a team with those
Yeah.
titles that are dedicated to it. In other cases, smaller, medium, mid market organizations, you might have to go to the marketing team, but you might have to go to the chief commercial officer that runs both marketing, customer success, and sales. So part of it's who owns the budget, and how do you convince a cross functional decisioning body that this is critical in order to effectively penetrate the market at speed, right? And where do you open the first door, right?
Right.
Like if you're coming in
Right.
a side door, to say, where do we start, and then build from there, so you can kind of prove it out. So I think those are the things that I'm playing, is that you can't do everything at once. You can't boil the ocean.
Right.
But you do need to get some alignment to cross functions around an operating model that people agree upon. We run a diagnostic that just gives a very clear idea of where the biggest plays should be run. right? Based on where they're the weakest. So you're leaning into where you think you can offer the most value without losing sight of the bigger picture,
Right.
right? So in a sense, it sort of lives above the functions, and that's actually what gives its power, because you're the connective layer. Because if these things aren't fully aligned from your roadmap communication through your product launch efforts in mobilization, both from a marketing and a sales go-to-market perspective, all the way through customer success. Oftentimes there's breakdowns because the product team builds something, it's quickly released to market. There's not enough communication down the pipe from the product and product marketing org through to the sales in customer success orgs. So you have sort of changing levels or varying variability and your level of subject matter expertise as you go closer and closer to sort of customer growth and customer management, right? And so you run into the classic problem of potential salespeople overselling, and
Nah, that
the
never
account management
happens.
team under delivering, right?
Never happens.
There's a
Ever.
gap, some sort of gulf between the product promise
Oh
and the
God,
actual
yeah.
product delivery. So how do
Yeah.
you actually ensure that those things are most effectively aligned, and do it through a centralized brain, right?
Right.
And that's what we call our growth operating system, is that you can bring all of this information and connect it to real-time APIs so that it's giving you decisioning plays, whether it's messaging or collateral or campaign orientation or ABM strategy or product documentation. It can ensure that this stuff is aligned for
Right.
strategic communications is another area, so
Yeah.
that every team, if they're doing their homework and paying close attention, knows exactly how they need to speak about these things in market, which is oftentimes the sales teams are raising their hand going, we don't know, like, and they want to get a product person on the phone,
Right.
or when they're in client calls, QBRs or otherwise, they're overly reliant on the product team, which
Right.
means what's happening there is the product organization and or product marketing, in some cases when they're particularly technical and advanced, is that they kind of hoard and have all of this deep intel that isn't equally communicated and enabled across the organization, right? And so there becomes an over reliance. Great for job security, but there's an over reliance. And how many organizations have I talked to over the last 20 years of my career? Countless, 90% of them, where the product teams are pulled off their product life cycles.
Yeah.
And the most executive leaders that are critical for orchestration and rolling out really high impact product deliverables based on what they've promised the board, the PE owners, everything. And they're not able to do it because they're in meetings half the time or more.
Yeah. Just trying to communicate what they're doing. Well, I mean, I think the whole product marketing discipline over time has been atrophied, and I blame software is so easy, like any knucklehead can do it. And I blame Agile, to be honest. Like, oh, we don't need to have anybody define what we're going to build. We're just going to build it in a sprint and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know of any young product marketer. I can't think of any that actually came up where there was something called a marketing requirements document. Marketing owned that. They own the business plan, because if you didn't, build this, they're not going to sell it. I mean, in the semiconductor business, we did this all the time because, it took months and months and sometimes years to develop a chip and a lot of money. Marketing had to own with the numbers. This is how we're going to market it. These are the features. Design built it. In this case, development built it. And if it didn't sell, it was marketing's head on the stick, Do you think...
and marketing is the cost center, gets the blame.
Yeah, gets the blame for everything.
And it starts from product spec
Yep.
through product delivery life cycles, through the program management of that play. And I find when product marketers, technical product marketers, are plugged into those earliest stage, maybe not the product spec, but at least have visibility of that, and then be tied into, I launched a program management function at Media Radar, to the actual delivery and commercialization. So there is a handoff when the product is either at a MVP level or a beta level, where it needs to be, you need time to set up the commercialization plays, right? Which is training the organization on exactly what the product does, the value that it delivers to clients, right? And the way to talk about it, and also the guardrails. What are the
Yeah.
third rails? What are the things that we should avoid saying or overpromising? How does the customer engagement team or the client success team deliver the product, right? That's oftentimes less the interest of the sales team. They want to sell the product, but oftentimes, you can have sales teams that sell things very effectively, and
Right.
due to product market fit challenges,
It just doesn't
due
work.
yeah, due to selling, we did this at Newstar. We sold that we were gangbusters with data management. I'm sorry, with MTA sales back in the early days of multi-touch attribution.
Yeah.
And they were selling them. We had one sales guy that was selling them extremely effectively to kind of large mid-market. Think of like the In-N-Out burgers
Yeah.
in the QSR space. They weren't the
Right.
McDonald's. But these teams had 10, 12 person marketing teams. They had maybe a data analyst, and the solution just didn't fit that particular market. So people said, we need to have incrementality testing and the ability to track, accurately attribution. We think we're spending too much on Google or too much in this channel. We don't
Yeah.
really know how to allocate budget because we don't really have a hold on attribution. That's a need that they had, but the solution that we had at Newstar was built for much larger, more sophisticated, data-driven sort of analytics organizations or marketing teams that had very large analytics organizations.
Right.
And so you couldn't, sort of retrofit that for a smaller, less sophisticated, less staffed organization. So that was a classic example of you're over promising something. And in this case, the facility of implementation of this solution in a mid-market brand with small, lean teams. And yet the client services team, which was a kind of a managed services at Newstar, couldn't deliver to meet the needs of those small clients because the clients were overly reliant on them because of lack of sophistication or lack of headcount. So
Yeah,
that's a
just don't have
classic
headcount.
example
Yeah.
of like, you could have fixed that problem before if you had a consistent, coherent view on who you should be selling to, what the teams need to look like, what the onboarding process looks like, and who to avoid selling this to. Don't allow a salesperson to go out on
That's actually a really good point. Like who not to sell it to.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to sell everything, but
yeah,
who's
because then
the
your churn rates are going to go through the
Oh,
roof.
yeah,
Right.
it's
And
ridiculous.
suddenly, people are
Crazy.
getting fired because you get 60% retention rates
Yeah.
in a certain segment. Well, that should have never happened. And if you had an operating model that was more reliant on like, hey, everybody's got SLAs. These are the parties that are involved, and
Yeah.
how we bring products to market and who we're selling and the value that it delivers, that could have been controlled for and done in a much faster pace, especially now with some of these learning systems, these deep learning systems,
Yeah.
which is where I'm really leaning in. I'm like, this shouldn't rely on just a couple of people that you hired on a product marketing team, right? This should be powered by the most advanced tech that we've got at our fingertips. And so that's what I set out to build with HighSignals.
Wow. Yeah. No, I totally hear you, because I think it's all this input, it's all the signals, it's everything. It just gets overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
Like if we weren't overwhelmed in the last 5 years, the next 5 years, it's saturated with just all sorts of AI slop, and
Yeah.
people are going to just like, it's inundated with things. And I'm curious.
Yeah,
You know-
well, to that point, before you said,
Yeah.
AI slop's a major issue. AI drift is a major issue.
drift, I've never heard of that one.
Strategic drift, where the AI will learn from let's say a set of data and go down a path where you don't want it to go, and sort of shift. Because it's fast. If it's not fed and orchestrated at the beginning,
Yeah.
it does deal with unstructured data very well, but that's why you build semantic layers. That's why you have orchestration layers, either as a strategic implementation play with like a semantic layer over your data, or as a consultative strategic layer where you're like, you're prompting and developing your agents and setting very specific guardrails in play, so that when it does deliver a decision, right, it is going through a bunch of checks, right? And so the system that we've built actually has it's almost an interrogation layer, right, where it'll look at 300 to 400 different decisions around a specific, let's say it's a segment that you're going after with specific value proposition, differentiation, campaign, sales motion, etc.
Yeah.
And it'll look at 300 or 400 versions of what you could do targeting this specific person with a specific product promise, for example.
Right.
But the decisions it comes down to might only be 3 or 4. So
Yeah.
it's we've set guardrails in place so that it's eliminating a lot of the noise, and it's focusing down. Whereas a human team might come back with 3 decisions or 3 options, but those 3 options haven't gone through hundreds of variations.
No one's run the simulation on that.
It's
I know that for a
it's
fact.
scenario planning, right?
Yeah,
like compounded scenario planning
Yeah.
that is super powerful.
Yeah. We used to, when I was in the semiconductor business and we were doing nerdy, geeky circuit simulation, right? We would run these things called Monte Carlo simulations, which a lot of people now in marketing, now that the tools are there, run Monte Carlos and also Bayesian distributions, right? And I mean, we would run
Bayesian priors. Yeah, I remember.
exactly, right? That's all geek, I think now that sort of stuff, the whole discipline mathematical approach now is actually, you can realize it because all these tools are pretty powerful, as well as the models and computing. And I remember we would just sit there and this was, I was doing semiconductors like almost 30 years ago. And it was, we would have to, we'd run these Monte Carlo simulations to see where it would break. And then we would refine. But those are hundreds of simulations just to see where the edges are. To your point, the guardrails, like I cannot get close to these edges or this thing will not work. Right.
Yep.
And I like that now for when it comes to AI, especially when it comes to scenario planning, segmentation, this whole idea of segment of one, like I'm marketing to an individual, only can happen when you are simulating this stuff constantly.
Yep.
And the only way to do that is through these tools, Bayesian statistics, Monte Carlo, all of these LLMs that can do it. But to your point, which I really like, is like, okay, what are the guardrails? And I'm curious, those guardrails, someone like you has to create, someone that knows what they're doing. I don't think LLMs can make their own guardrails.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious how you think about that, because I think the power is in that. Don't make this thing go off the rails.
Yeah.
Here's where you should be. Here's your boundary conditions.
Yeah, and I think that ties into that sort of middleware, that semantic layer, or how you're engineering the agent in the beginning, right? In terms of what it should avoid and what it should stick to, right? And part of it is like, how do you interpret the data and the information that it's ingesting, right? And how to define things so they're not being defined correctly. So that's your sort of middleware, your semantic layer. And then I think it's setting those rules of engagement up when you're setting up. Like I do this as projects in ChatGPT Pro. So I'm one of those guys that spends $200 a month on Pro.
Oh yeah, I do too. Well, are you kidding me? That's the best.
Yeah, and I've learned a lot of really interesting things. And one thing that I took some inspiration from a LinkedIn post, I think it was. I was reading about it, or maybe it was a Forbes article. A woman that created a GPT to simulate Steve Jobs as her boss.
Oh wow!
So when she has an idea or a concept or a process or a strategy, she goes to quote unquote Steve Jobs, agentic Steve, and asks him questions. And so she basically created guardrails around who is, how do you define who Steve Jobs is? These are your learning parameters. This is the type of input that I want to give to you. And you set those rules and structures in place before it starts generating outcomes. And then she just fed it, Steve Jobs autobiography, all of this information. And she uses it to bounce ideas off and to get feedback that would be, so point being is that that's an example of something on maybe the B2B side that brand marketers are doing on the B2C side with synthetic data, right? You don't need necessarily the actual identity of a person. You remember the early days of Meta? We talked about this at CES a lot.
Yeah.
And I remember being in a startup and we would get access to Meta mobile data. And it was incredible how much information they made available to anybody that had an account
Yeah.
like an admin account,
Yeah.
within the meta universe of everything, all the devices that you logged into, right? IP address, mobile IDs, everything. It was just a ton of just PII being passed to anybody that was leveraging the Facebook system.
Right.
And then ATT came into play, from Apple, and sort of shut that down. And Meta innovated. It was sort of, they were forced to do it. And they came up with this whole synthetic data approach. I'm not sure they invented it, but it's like you could actually mirror
Yep.
and with predictive analytics figure out who people actually are without actually
Yep.
having all of that personal
Oh yeah.
information.
Yeah. No,
Right.
that's a big thing now. There was this paper, it was like called SSR, and it was semantic something. I don't remember how it would, but it was basically simulating consumers.
Yep.
And it would, through AI or through LLMs and some Bayesian statistics, it would figure out Likert scales. So you could build a bunch of products and then send it to this synthetic customer, and it would say, I like this, I don't, and it would tell you why. And the cool innovation was, it wasn't that it would score it from 1 to 5. It would tell you why it would buy it or not buy it, and then the LLM would take that and then cast it to a score. And they found that was the best way, because typically what happens with LLMs is they always regress to the mean. So everything's always like 2.5 or 3. Like it was always, it couldn't do the numbers right. But now, I mean, they're getting 80, 90% accuracy on these synthetic customers. And what that means is that you can just run tons of simulations, and then you go run it on real people, and chances are
Yep.
it'll be better. So similar to what Meta was doing. And do you really think that, they do that on the B2C side? Do you think B2B is going to like catch on? Because
Yeah, and I think you can synthetically create, and part of what we're doing is that you can not only are we applying some of like Carl Jung's
yep,
10
yep,
personality types,
yep,
neuroticism, so you can sort of get to the human side of people that fill specific functions, whether you're a data scientist or you're a chief revenue officer or chief marketing officer. So that adds the human component of, these are the traits of the people in this specific role, just
mhm,
on average, right? And then you can add further definition with examples
mhm,
of how they should be thinking about the use cases, the needs, the challenges,
mhm,
the competitive realities that a specific functional leader at a specific level will expect to see, right? And so you're basically creating a synthetic model that says CMO versus director of marketing, right?
right,
Male versus female. You could subsegment that in 100 different ways, right?
yep,
And it helps to give better predictability as to what is going to resonate. Now, that's classically seen as a B2C play. Like, what is going to
right,
resonate to somebody that lives on the Lower East Side
right,
versus the Upper West Side of Manhattan? Very different neighborhoods, different potential socioeconomic backgrounds, demographics. They need different messages to resonate, right? Local
correct.
messages, right? There's a lot of complaints about some of the Chinese companies coming to the US that oftentimes use images in the backdrops, like city images or
Yeah.
urban images that are Chinese cities. And it's very easy to that's not a very effective form of personalization when you're marketing someone in a different city. It's not,
Big city.
so part of that's like that pattern recognition. What is
Right.
going to appeal to a specific function of a
Right.
specific type within a specific type of organization? And then you can layer on top of that, what are they seeing from other players? What are they seeing from other
Well,
competitors?
that's the other thing, is that closing the loop that we talked about
Yeah.
before, are like so powerful and I do think that simulation testing and feedback now in the agentic world, especially for marketers, I think people are just going to demand it. And there's going to be like, look, why are you not simulating this? Why are
Yeah.
you not running a quick little poll or surveying your customers like super fast? There's so many ways to do this. And one, it's cheaper. And two, you can just like, instead of the 3 options, now you've done 300, and you're like, okay, is this working and not working? And I find that so powerful.
Yeah.
I'm just nerd
Yeah.
out on this stuff.
Yeah,
I
and
love
if
it.
you've got if it's ingesting data from your competitive landscape,
Yes.
you're constantly updating feedback from your CRM, right? So
Yep.
you can have engagement rates with both advertising as well
Yeah.
as sort of direct contact if you've got
Yeah.
that data. It allows it to continuously update what's working, what's not, what's resonating, and it never is static. It's
Right.
constantly learning, and the more information you feed into the sort of the growth operating system, the better it becomes at true ABM,
Yeah.
right? Speak to the function like you know about their business, you know about their needs and priorities and challenges and risks, right? You
Right.
know a little bit of who they are, and you know how they're being approached by every other vendor in the ecosystem. So how do you leverage that kind of stuff? If you left that to a product marketer to do, it could take them manually months
Oh,
to come up with a
if they even did it right,
yeah. You might have
like
a battle card, you might have collateral, but that stuff collects dust and is almost moot the minute
it's worthless the minute it's done. Yeah.
And to me, that's the power of these learning systems, is that don't worry, don't spend hours and days and weeks and months collating and curating what you feed it. You have to be somewhat careful.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But
Junk in, the garbage in,
but
garbage out.
yeah, but feed it as much as possible and set up as many direct data feeds as you can, which signal how different segments in different personas and different functions are actually interacting with your brand.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. So Brett, what's the next decision you got to make?
Oh, we're at that point of the show.
We're at that point of the show.
Well, the next decision I have to make is, should I pitch Signal and Noise? No,
you
yeah.
can.
Yeah,
of course.
yeah. I'll tell you. Well, Signal and Noise, we're launching a media company as well. We have our own podcast. Myself and Rio Longacre, who's a partner and global head of ad tech at Credera, which is owned by Omnicom. And so it was a little podcast that we ran while I was at Media Radar. We took it. We're launching it by the time I think this publishes as a media company that has an executive voices section, which is crowdsources executive thought leaders that can't get their message or their intelligence out in other channels, whether it's a marketecture or an ad exchanger, right? And it gives them a channel to basically run their own podcast under the Signal and Noise brand, write their own articles. So we're giving them publication and promotion of their expertise. And so we have people in the AI space, people in the robotics space, places that we don't necessarily, Rio and I, don't necessarily play, to broaden the sort of aperture of what we cover. So that's really exciting. That's kind of my next big thing. How do we actually bring Signal and Noise as a media company to fruition? We're going to be launching events to support it. And it's all around sort of operator, founder, builder led media versus journalistic sort of points of view.
Oh,
right.
Interesting.
So we're bringing the builders to the table and saying, share with people what you've learned as an operator, as a founder, as a product leader, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
About the category, the space, not about your company per se,
but
about the knowledge that you've amassed, and that type of a sort of direct to the source intel is really something that I've been pretty passionate about for a long time.
Well, I think also, in the AI slop era, authenticity is where it's at, man.
Yeah, authenticity. People are starting to be able to cut through and see what is generic, regurgitated, repurposed content, and what is authentic, deeply human, sometimes provocative, and deeply like learning oriented content, right? And that's where I think we want to play, because there's enough sort of surface level bullshit in the industry that I'm like, people want they want to double click, they want to go into and gain something from listening to a podcast, reading an article, going to an event. And that's what we're trying to provide with Signal Noise. But the next big decision about HighSignals, I think is for us, I think it's the evolution of how much do we build versus how much do we partner to build our stack, right? And so we're partnering, and building a little bit, partnering for the most part in the beginning, and adding this sort of orchestration layer, because we realize there are 1,001 point solutions, and there's going to be a tidal wave.
It is ridiculous.
People with a lovable account and some Claude, vibe coding experience, can just roll out MVPs of stuff that never escaped prototype phase.
Yeah.
So how do
Yeah.
we actually take stuff that you don't have to reinvent the wheel
Right.
and orchestrate it into an operating model? And that's where my whole strategy, like, I don't think consulting is enough. I don't think a set of recommendations and
No.
a PowerPoint deck is enough. You need to be able to hypercharge your decisioning, right? Which is part of that brain operating system play.
Yeah.
Hyper speed up your production beyond
Mhm.
the means of just humans.
Right.
And those are the things that if you can connect sort of extremely high fidelity strategy with extremely fast and accurate execution, not as a pure agency play, but just bring this thing to, like, now we've enabled the sales organization.
Yeah.
Now we've set up this program in a way that we've done the strategic communications play. We've done this campaign at speed, and it's always on learning. So to me,
Yeah.
that the decision is, how much do you actually need to build when you're offering the expertise and the orchestration around a
I
system that might be, it's kind of like when brands go to AWS. They don't have to rebuild AWS.
No,
right?
no, you're right.
The tech becomes a little bit the commodity in a sense, right?
Well, and I think that's what you're seeing. So my prediction is, products democratize. You can build anything, even if it's shitty.
Yep.
But honestly, like, product is not competitive anymore. To me, it's marketing the product. Also, I also think that it's this orchestration idea. Like, how do you connect all these disparate things together with a strategy that's going to work? And to your point, that learns. Because, I mean, Decision Council, we're the strategic sales and marketing play, right? B2B. We're actually moving more into how do we execute and activate that strategy. Because what we found is that, strategy without execution is just a shiny PowerPoint, right?
It's hallucination.
It's hallucinate. It's not even worth the paper it's theoretically printed on. But nowadays, right, it's that product's democratized. So you can build things that matter. But I think your point about orchestration, I think, is the thing. I have been hearing this more often and more often, that this orchestration is the most important thing, because all these point solutions, they don't integrate, even though they say they integrate. Really?
Yeah. And the days of sort of monolithic SaaS, think of Salesforce and Oracle, Salesforce and Oracle, are quickly, like, there's a disruptive play here, which is largely agentic driven, where if you've got a jobs to be done trained agent that can plug into your data warehouse, your data lakehouse, your fragmented stack, in the case of what we're doing from a business intelligence perspective, and deliver outcomes and insights much faster than having to combine systems and do massive integration and data hygiene work. To me, it's composable and it's agentic, and it lives on top of your data with the semantic layer, which is the layer that gives it those guardrails, and the rules of the road on how to interpret in the type of outcomes that you'd want to deliver. But to me, I think that's a little bit the future. It's almost like the death of SaaS is.
I think it's the death of horizontal SaaS. And I think it's vertical SaaS is the way to go. And I do think it's this vertical SaaS orchestration, best in breed tools pulled together with really high quality strategy that gets activated through some execution layer. And if you can do that, you're gold. And honestly, that's the only thing that's going to win. I can't see anything else winning, because the world's just so complex. So great. Well, hey, Brett, appreciate you being on the show. Thanks again. Everyone go check out HighSignals and also Signal to Noise.
No, Signal and Noise.
Sorry, Signal and Noise.
HighSignals.com and signalandnoise.ai, which will be launching. We're on LinkedIn and YouTube and Spotify and in Apple Podcasts, but we are launching that site, I think, right around the time this podcast goes live.
Awesome. We're definitely look forward to that.
Take a look at that.
Be really fun. So thanks everyone for listening to The Next Decision. If you get the opportunity, give us a rating and review. We really appreciate it. Share it with your friends. And when it launches, also go listen to Signal and Noise. Take care, everyone.